1,000 different things, 1,000 different, every minute of the day you can find things all the time, and I think that's one of the big benefits of it. So I don't know that I have, specific influences that I would cite in that way. I mean, I do think Orwell is somebody that, had you not excluded him from my answer, is probably someone I would have cited. I certainly think that anybody who writes about political and media issues in any meaningful way has been influenced by Noam Chomsky. I think that anyone who does journalism in any meaningful way, whether they know it or not, has been greatly shaped and influenced by I.F. Stone. Interestingly, my writing career is fairly young. I mean, I've only been doing this for 5 or 6 years. And so people who influenced me, what first got me into writing on the internet was the fact that there were other people writing on the internet, bloggers who I thought were contributing really kind of innovative and passionate advocacy. And so for me, it's still an always evolving and ongoing process. But, I think I'm influenced by a lot of different sources rather than a handful of 2 or 3, but I would probably name the ones I named if forced to.
Thank you.
Okay.
There's a trial in New York going on right now for cops who are being accused of corruption, and some of the things are quite minor, like ticket fixing, but some are much more serious. And there's a large group of police who came out and supported them very publicly. And I wanted to say, do you think that police officers enjoy a similar type of immunity to the kind that you've been talking about? And do you think there's a little bit of a difference, too, between that and the sort of elite immunity?
Well, police officers are an interesting case, and it kind of muddles the narrative, because if you look at, for example, what's happening in the Occupy protest movements, the police officers are essentially the tools of what the movement is calling the 1%. They're the way in which force and power are applied and asserted, but police officers themselves,
they're the people whose salaries are being slashed and whose pensions are being stolen and whose economic security is being destroyed along with everybody else. So they're kind of this hybrid force. They're sort of like soldiers in the military. They are not welcome in the circles of elites because they're not that. But to the extent that they are operating as the arm or the weapon of the elite class, then of course they are people who commit egregious crimes all the time and are protected by the court system and by the law, and with rare exception are subjected to punishment, but not because they themselves are privileged, but because essentially as the guards of those in power, there's an interest to shield them from accountability. They get the elite exemption when they act to serve and protect the interests of the elite. And I think that's what you're seeing in terms of them being able to use this excessive force without much consequence or punishment.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. I know you care a lot about censorship. We all do. It's pretty obvious when it's on network news or Fox, CNN, but censorship on the left is an issue that sometimes is overlooked. Now, there's a website called commondreams.org. I know you know of it because they publish a lot of your work and a lot of leftist writers. The problem with that website is they routinely censor comments that people make after the articles. In fact, David Sirota even had one of his comments deleted, disappeared. And then they actually ban people from commenting if they say things that are not correct according to them. They actually purged people who wrote comments against Obama in 2007 leading up to the election. That's a big loss because we might have had a more effective debate about his candidacy. My question to you is this. Are you aware that this happens? Because I know your stuff appears all the time there. Chris Hedges' stuff, a lot of really, really good writers. Are you aware that this happens?
By the way, that is done without Salon's permission, so Glenn has no, is not culpable at all for that.
No, I totally understand that.
I mean, you mean publish it?
It's published without our permission,
right?
yeah.
Right. But it does appear there. Okay, the question is this. I assume you're aware of it. David Sirota probably has mentioned it to other Salon writers. Maybe I'm wrong. But if you are aware of it, do you think that you and other writers might consider getting together and perhaps occupy commondreams.org and suggest to them, this is unacceptable. We don't want Orwell monitoring the comments, because they literally disappear people and go back in history and erase their comments. It's really creepy.
So I'm not aware of the practices of this website in terms of how they moderate their comment section. I know absolutely nothing about it, literally. I will say that I think that the word censorship should be applied when the government is punishing people or imprisoning people for the expression of their views, or preventing the expression of views, because when private entities do it, you have the option not to go to Common Dreams, but to go to salon.com, where you can engage in vibrant debate without much moderation. You know, my personal approach to internet conversation is that it takes a little bit of moderation to prevent people who are there to do nothing but disrupt, but that by and large, adults are best left to their own devices in terms of deciding what they want to read or not want to read, or what they should write and shouldn't write, and generally the community takes care of that. So that's how I manage my own comment section, which I value greatly. I don't know how Common Dreams does it.
Thank you, sir.
Only woman in this line.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Glenn. My name is Cynthia Papermaster. I work with Code Pink, an activist group, and the National Accountability Action Network, and we are a network of accountability groups, including the CCR and the ACLU and other groups. I was disappointed to hear you say that you didn't think accountability would happen for torture policymakers, at least not for 20 years or so. We're not giving up this fight, and I want you to know there are a couple of cases that are live right now. Padilla v. U in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has not been decided yet. U doesn't think he should be prosecuted or have a lawsuit against him for torture, but Padilla is actually prevailing in that case so far. And there's a case against Rumsfeld, I believe, in the Second Circuit that says Rumsfeld can be sued. So there's some promise there. And, you know, I came tonight because I admire and appreciate so much the work you've done for torture accountability. It's really important. Our former Vice President, Dick Cheney, is going to be in town next Tuesday at the Palace Hotel. We need to do some activism, and we need to show Dick Cheney he's not welcome in this town, because torture is not something we appreciate. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, just briefly on that, you know, to the extent that you went up to the microphone to tell me that you think I'm wrong about my prediction, I absolutely hope you're right. And I would love nothing more than to come back before you all and humbly confess my error. That's my biggest dream on this question. But, you know, and you are right that some cases are making their way through the courts. Unfortunately, the court's tendency is to protect people in political office from being sued by those who have been accused of being terrorists. So literally every single victim of the war on terror who has attempted to bring their case in an American court, they haven't lost their case. They haven't had their case heard. The Obama Justice Department raises secrecy and immunity issues, and courts have almost in every case accepted them. When they haven't accepted them, appellate courts have intervened to prevent even civil liability from happening. So when I look at the Obama administration's willingness to shield these officials and to prevent the victims from having their day in court, when I look at other countries' unwillingness to incur the cost to investigate, and when I look at what I know is the bias of federal courts to be very deferential to political officials on these national security questions, I'm just pessimistic. But I love what Code Pink does on these accountability issues. I still write about accountability issues because I hope to do what I can to bring a positive outcome about. I'm just, you know, honestly assessing what I think is the prospects, and I hope you continue your work, and I'll definitely continue mine.
Hi, my name is Jason. I work with Lyndon LaRouche, The Economist. And with the collapse, the complete breakdown of the entire global financial system, you know, you look at it, you see it in the EU, collapse of the EU, collapse here with Wall Street, the banks. And this has always been, this is the collapse of the British Empire. You know?
Yeah, sir, I'm sorry, we only have two more minutes.
My question is that since this collapse is going on, the threat of world war is there. The only solution on the table right now, you know, including the impeachment of Barack Obama, is also the Glass-Steagall law. It's in the House. It's called H.R. 1489. It's not in the Senate. Congressmen have backed down from putting it forth in the Senate. Would you endorse it and fight for
Which
this
law? What law?
Glass-Steagall.
You mean the reintroduction of Glass-Steagall? I mean, I think that the elimination of these restraints on what investment banks can do, that's what you're talking about, the inability, the restrictions on banks to be able to engage in investment banking activity and commercial banking activity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was done during the Clinton era, and that was obviously one of the factors precipitating the wild years of leading up to the financial collapse. So I'm absolutely in favor of the reimposition of those restrictions. I mean, I think they worked for decades to avert the kind of financial collapse that we almost experienced in 2008.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Glenn.
Hey.
Jeremy Manning.
Hi.
No relation to Bradley, but I agree with you. He's a great patriot. First of all, thank you from the heart for all that you do and have done.
Thanks.
But I had a question about the elites. You've spoken with eloquence about the elites tonight and their effects on our society. And I'm wondering if, I haven't read your book yet, but I will.
Oh, you haven't? Next.
No,
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
but I'm wondering if
You'll have a chance after this, by the way.
I'll take it up. I wonder if you have gone into or examined or investigated the philosophy underlying the elites. Do they have a coherent philosophy? I think they might. Or is it? Do you see it more as an ad hoc situation where they're just
Well,
with
there's
money
one,
and they're
I mean, that's a complex question. I do address it in the book. But one interesting component of that is that there's a study that was done by Canadian researchers into varying perceptions of entitlements and prerogatives among people in different statuses in life. And one of the things that they found is that people who are in positions of power come to believe in the justness and merit of their elevated status. And that with that comes the prerogative to break rules because they think they're the society's elite, that they're superior, and therefore they can break rules. And they break rules a lot more readily than people who are less powerful. And when they do break rules, they tend to have almost no remorse. Because there is this interesting psychological dynamic that the higher opinions we have of ourselves, the less we believe we should be constrained. And I think this is part of what actually has been motivating Obama as well. If you think that the person in power is this sort of violent, primitive, uneducated, ignorant cowboy, then you're going to think that that person in power needs all kinds of restraints and transparency and checks because otherwise they're going to do evil things. But if you think that the person in power, and if that's yourself especially, that is a magnanimous, good, enlightened person, then you're going to think that the need for constraints and transparency and checks and balances is much, much less because whatever it is that you're doing, by definition, is in pursuit of the good, even when what you're doing is a violation of rules and laws and the things that you said you believed in. You find ways to justify them. And so I think people who are in superior positions, power in terms of power, come to believe that that is entitled, that they're entitled to that, they deserve it. You know, the whole idea of privilege, what it means in Latin is private law, that they come to mean that, believe that they are entitled to have a different set of rules applied to them, that they're not there in their position by virtue of luck or fortuitous circumstances, but because they deserve it. And once you believe that about yourself, you believe that you're entitled to do things
are prohibited from doing.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Last question. David Levitt, Be Your Government. Following up on your message or your comments about optimism about a kind of an American or world or the Occupy movement as an American spring, what's to prevent in the 2012 elections or going forward the 71% of people who were so disgusted in 2010 that they refused to vote for Democrats or Republicans getting together and electing people who want the elites to be held accountable?
Maybe there are a couple things about that, and that's a really complex question, so I'm probably going to give you an unsatisfying answer. I'm just warning you in advance, so I'm just going to focus on a couple quick things. One is there are extreme structural constraints to mounting a candidacy outside of the Republican and Democratic parties. And all kinds of things determine how viable a candidate is, including their ability to get out their message. They need lots of money for it. All the fundraising mechanisms are already co-opted by both parties. It's very difficult to get on ballots. It's difficult to be part of debates. It's essentially a system designed to exclude that kind of alternative that you're just describing. The other more problematic feature of it, and this is what I think the Occupy movement